And call the meeting to order. And our first item is acceptance of the Instructional Committee meeting minutes of November 6th and the Special Instructional Committee meeting minutes of November 13th. Any questions?
I've just handed the corrections to both sets of minutes to Ms. Latour, so.
Okay, thanks. Should we take consensus? Down the other, Kathy?
Yes.
Actually, you missed Amanda.
Oh, Amanda, I'm sorry. She's sneaking in.
Yes, she's tucked in the corner there.
Yeah, you sure are. Wow. Amanda?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
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 Yes with corrections.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And item 3 is proposed addition of new high school course, Unified Physical Education.
We have a demonstration or a speech from a student here. This is Meredith Negris from Lyman Hall High School.
Welcome.
Hello. This is a copy of my annotated bibliography for my research. If you'd like to take one and pass it down.
Thank you.
And then this is also a copy of the PowerPoint presentation if anyone wants to take notes as well. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my capstone proposal presentation. For my capstone project, I would like to start a unified physical education program at Lyman Hall High School. I'm Meredith Negris. I'm a junior at Lyman Hall High School, and I'm a part of Ms. Castelli's capstone class. Before we start, I would like to say a few things about myself. For the past 3 summers, I've been a mentor at Wallingford Public Schools Power Play program. Through this program, I've been able to befriend and be a role model for these special education students. This life-changing experience has put me in the right track for my future. After high school, I'd like to go to college to become a special education teacher. Through high school, I've also participated in field hockey and the track teams, and I've also danced for 13 years. This is also a picture of my family. On the left, it's my sister Eliza. She's a sophomore in college. It's my mom, my brother Blair, who's an 8th grader at DAG, my dad and me. I'm the middle child.
Your parents are here, too.
When you see a ball, what are you able to do with it? Are there any suggestions?
Kick it.
Throw
it.
Sit on it. It looks like a PT ball on the right.
Shoot it. You can catch it, throw it, roll it, bounce it, and so much more. And how easily are you guys able to do these tasks?
Easily.
Pretty easily, right? Well, these tasks are much harder for special education students to do. They're not getting the proper exercise to maintain their body's needs. And they also don't have the same after-school opportunities as general education students do to perform these tasks. The benefits of exercise in special education are that it improves motor and social skills, coordination, balance, academics, and attention span. It also instills a sense of self-confidence and independence. Through my research, I also have found out that big environments cause students to be overwhelmed and give them a hard time focusing, which also affect students' abilities to exercise in their PE classes. These are some of my citations. In front of you is the annotated bibliography if you would like to further see what my citations are about. To solve this problem, I would like to start a unified physical education program at Lyman Hall High School. The specialized PE class for special educations is based around their exercise needs and skill levels with the help of general education students. This PE class will be ran by a current PE teacher, which Mr. Outlaw has shown great interest. The ratio will be for every 1 special education student, there will be 2 general education students to meet state policy and to also have help for all special education students. I will be personally creating a specific curriculum based around these needs and skill levels that the students have. It will include life skills that they will be using in the future. For example, a job opportunity that they will have could be working at a grocery store, and they would have to learn how to be able to bend over and pick up boxes and put them on shelves. So we can teach them how to do squats properly so they do not hurt themselves. This class will also have structure because that's what is best for them. In the beginning of each class, there will be a picture schedule of visuals of what will be happening that day so they know what to expect. At the end of each class, it will be closed by various yoga stretches and also opportunities to bounce on exercise balls to lower their heart rates. This course is designed for students interested in pursuing a career in special education and is also designed to provide positive relationships between general education students and special education students. The coursework will focus on addressing development of students' physical, emotional, and social well-beings. Activities will include games, sports, and life skills. Instruction will be developed by regular education students in conjunction with a PE teacher and will strive to improve students' self-esteem, interpersonal relationships, and responsible behavior. Skills focused on in this class will be motor and social skills, flexibility, and endurance. Other skills will depend on the population, and a series of baseline activities will be set the first few classes to see what these skills may be. An idea for Unit 1 could be ultimate frisbee. Different activities will be taught to teach each skill. An idea for activity 1 would be for all students to have a beanbag, and they will be tossing them into hula hoops, and peers will help them to learn to throw these beanbags from their hips, which will be what it will be like when throwing a frisbee. Activity 2 will be there will be hula hoops placed on the ground, and students will run from hula hoop to hula hoop to practice changing direction like they would in an actual ultimate frisbee game. They will then catch and throw a ball with their peer partner, and then they will run to the next hula hoop to practice throwing and changing directions, which will happen in a game as well. The next activity will be practicing throwing an actual frisbee from their hip, and then learning to actually catch that frisbee as well with peer support. The next one will be to help practice teamwork. Students will gather in a circle, and one student will start with a ball. They will call out another student's name and pass it to that student, and that will continue. This will help students to learn how to work together and use teamwork, and also learn how to communicate, which will help in their future as well. To attract peers to this program, I will have an announcement in PE classes to spread awareness of this program. And for students that are interested, I will hold a meeting to provide more information for those students so that they can choose this course for their 2018 school year. And to create a more competitive nature, it has been thought to have an application or essay process, which will include a scenario with a specific situation and of how you would help a student with a specific disability in that scenario. They will also include why they are interested in this class and why they want to take it. Another idea would be before the class starts to have a kickstart party with general education students, some teachers, and possibly a few special education students so everyone can meet who they will be helping in this school year, and also to go over the last few things that will be happening in that program. This program will benefit special education students because they will be receiving the proper exercise they need to benefit their body's needs. It will also benefit regular education students. Some students do not feel comfortable in regular PE classes. They don't feel comfortable participating in front of their peers. This program will create a sense of security, and they can become role models for the special education students. They will also be receiving more exercise than they would in an actual PE class, because instead of sitting out because they don't want to do anything, they'll be able to demonstrate, help the students, and also run through some exercise to make sure that these activities are best for these students. I've talked to many people throughout this experience so far. Mrs. Metzger and Ms. DiPaola are actually the people that introduced me to this program and told me all about it. Mr. Outlaw was the person that told me he's been the one that's been interested in helping me in this program. He's going to teach it, and we actually met the other day about different activities and structural things that we can do to keep this program going. I met with Mr. Terrell, and he did a pilot program last year at Sheehan, so he's given me a lot of tips of things that worked well for him and more steps that I need to go through to make this successful. I've met with Mrs. Holt because to organize a field trip to the Newtown program, because they also have a unified PE program, and they would like to see me go there, and that is in the possible makings of seeing that will come through. I will be meeting with Mrs. Lavato to help me create a curriculum for this program, since she is a PE teacher for special education students as her career. Mr. Corso has helped me break down the steps and tell me how to be successful in this program and what things I need to acquire for this. And he also was the one that insisted me on going on the field trip to go see the Newtown program. Ms. Castelli was the one that helped me for the past 3 months and have helped teach me the skills I need to be able to be standing in front of all of you to be presenting right now. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mike.
Go ahead.
Oh, she did a great job teaching you to do that. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
That was a long time to stand up there and talk.
Meredith, I would love to come up there and give you a big hug. And I'm going to do that. I wish you can go up to the state and give that presentation to our legislators up there, because I think more people need to hear your ideas here. And you really hit home with me when you mentioned at the very beginning, if you can just bear with me, the point you made about doing squats so that kids could pick up boxes and stuff. There are so many things like that that the average citizen doesn't realize are so very important skills for these adults or children with special needs. And I've experienced that myself right now, because I have a daughter who just started working at Amazon. And it's a big issue. And they almost were going to take her off the job because of the fact that she can't lift certain boxes. She does pretty good most of the time. And they were going to end her job there. That only started maybe 2 months ago. But this is the kind of stuff our schools need to be doing. And we got to get the word out there that the state needs to fund these things for these children with special needs, because they're many times just forgotten. And it's been very obvious this last legislative term when they have reduced the monies that they have. You got a good head up there. I am just so proud of you. I think this is wonderful. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Karen?
I think this is a great idea because it's a good opportunity to integrate students with special needs with their typical peers. And I like your idea of picture board social stories to orchestrate what step is next, because sometimes that's very helpful in looking at what's going to happen. A couple of questions I have. How will students that have an IEP with OT and PT goals be integrated into this particular unified physical education program?
Some teachers will be told what the disabilities of each student will, so they will know how to help each student, but that is something else I would have to research into more in depth of how that would work.
I think that would be, yeah, because certain students will have certain occupational and physical therapy goals, and that might be something that could be worked on in that particular setting.
And to help Meredith out, as she discussed at the start of the course, they're going to be doing some pre-assessments to help determine what those needs are. So the teacher will be aware of the needs of the specific students, but they're also going to take some baseline measurements to see if they can improve those, and then have something to measure before and afterwards.
The other question is, in the write-up, it indicates that there will be a small increase in physical education class sizes. How much of an increase is anticipated?
Not a significant one. If there would be any increase, it would increase by a few students, but the same general number of students in our physical education classes will be occupying this class, so it won't necessarily be causing a disruption in any of the other physical education classes.
Well, Meredith, I applaud what you have done, because having a child with special needs that has gone through this school district, certainly this is a wonderful opportunity for our students with special needs, as well as our students that are typical, so that they can get to know one another and build on their strengths. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Roxanne?
Yeah. Thanks, Meredith. Great job. And I'll just say ditto to both what Karen and Mike said. So just to piggyback, though, on the issue about class size. So, Joe, I mean, in your mind, and I assume Rosemary, too, you guys, this is a fairly, I don't want to say fairly easy thing to integrate, because I know, I don't know, but I have this image of, like, when you guys are trying to create your classes for each year, and it's like this big, board that you're just juggling a million things.
So it used to be a board.
Okay.
Now we have a very handy computer.
There you go. But you know what I mean. I mean, in terms of it, every year is it's a juggling act.
I think the most
really
difficult part will be recruiting the students to participate.
Yeah. Okay.
So that'll be
The special
peers.
the typical peers.
Typical peers.
Okay,
Recruiting
gotcha.
them to participate, I don't really see it being a problem, but that will be probably the most footwork our counselors will have to do in order to get those students interested and involved in the program, especially in the first few years, because it'll be new.
So, is there an opportunity to have an enticement like community service hours?
No, they'd be receiving credit. So
Okay, so that's not okay. It's almost like double dipping.
But
Okay.
we do think, truthfully, it will entice those kids that are generally interested in PE and special education.
Correct.
The
Yeah,
young
it's a
kids
good.
that are really interested
Sure.
in that particular field.
And that's a great opportunity right there. I can see that. And so, Meredith, I would also, I get the privilege of every year invited to a brunch at the end of the school year that are the iced tea kids. And at that brunch are the partners where a lot of these kids do, whether they work or they do, they have some type of, they may shadow businesses. And these businesses are tried and true that are perennial givers, if you will. They provide employment opportunities for this program. So they might be a source for you. One, to say what exactly are there certain skills that you would like to see reinforced through this course, like maybe lifting, they may have some special items that you may not have thought of that you could work in tandem with them that would be great. And they could also potentially be a financial resource. So they tend to be pretty generous folks, and I would just add them to your list as resources. And I'm sure the school can provide those businesses.
We've been working together for too long as a board, because I was going to mention that at the end.
They're
that
wonderful.
They're incredible. We
Yes.
have a variety of different functions. We have All Pets Club. We have Salvation
Right.
Army.
Right.
We have Napoli Pizza. We have also there's a Primerica, which is an office building that they clean. So there's different unique skills, but that would be a great opportunity, and we can work to help facilitate a conversation with them, to really have them provide you those skills, and working with Mr. Outlaw, as well as with Mr. Loomis, who I want to make sure that we mention has been a support too. They could help gear those particular skills. In terms of the OT-PT, that's another key piece that they could help with that, because those students receive the additional OT and PT services. So by having that meeting, and that again is easily facilitated for you and with you. And then marketing, you already said you have your plan that you're going to start putting in place, which is exciting, and I know that the staff at Lyman Hall will support you. But I think when Sheehan has done this in the past, they haven't had a real challenge getting students to be peers.
That's good
There's
to
never
hear.
been a problem. The kids have stepped right up, because I saw you shaking your heads. No, there's not going to be a problem, because that's always a value-added piece. So I think
Right.
that with your energy, your enthusiasm, I think that'll only lend itself even greater to the success of the program. And I do echo everyone's sentiment of gratitude for thinking of doing this, because not only did you learn a lot in the capstone process of doing research and presenting and such, but it really shows the empathy that you have for others.
Right.
And taking your experience with Power Play and moving it forward, it's great to use those things. It's always great to be able to leverage prior experiences for future opportunities. So I really do appreciate your hard work, and I'm very proud of you, as I'm sure your parents are too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mom and Dad, you should be very proud, and I'm sure you are. Congratulations, Meredith. Great job. Keep us posted, and if you need anything from us, come see us,
Thank
it's,
you.
It's, we
Meredith,
like
ma-
hearing from you.
Yeah, one question. Terrific job. You did a wonderful job. Just curious as to the role of the capstone project in this. Do you think that you would have been able to do a presentation like this, a recommendation to the school system, if it wasn't for the program that Capstone provides to you?
Probably not.
Probably not. Interesting.
Good to hear.
And when did you start thinking about this as
The,
a program?
September.
September.
The end of September.
Was it in of this end of September of last year? This year?
This year.
Wow.
This year.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, you did a lot of
Wow. You sure did. Tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
Had you been thinking about it because you had a capstone requirement, or
Well, it's
Had
not.
you-
It's not required yet. I took it as an elective this
you
year.
took it as an elective?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
With this program, this unified phys ed program in mind?
I didn't know about this program until I started Capstone and I started coming up with ideas. And I know I want to do something with special education students because I've been working with
Oh,
them for the
wonderful.
past 3 summers. So that's something I'm very passionate about. So I know I want to help them. And I started talking to Ms. T-Paola and Ms. Metzger, who are the special ed teachers at Lyman Hall. And they were telling me about this program and it was something that sparked interest and I wanted to have it at Lyman Hall.
Wonderful. So it gave you an opportunity to pursue a passion and an interest that you have, career.
Yes.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Great job. Well, sounds like you have a wonderful program underway, Sal. The capstone program.
We're very fortunate with the staff that we have running the program, and we will be at some point bringing to you we're actually looking to continue to evolve the program as we go towards implementation, full implementation. So there'll be more to
Terrific.
hear about Capstone in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for all the help, everybody. It's clear that something like that takes a real wholesome effort. Our next item is a presentation of the 2017-18 Middle School Improvement Plan. Oh, wait a minute. Do we have to? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We have to.
Technology,
proposal.
sorry.
I'm sorry, 1 second. So we need to take consensus on the proposed addition of the new high school unified physical ed program. Amanda?
I did.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh. Oh, is it? No,
Taking consensus.
consensus, right? Yeah, it's committee meeting.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely, yes.
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 Kathy, just
Kathy's.
Say yes.
say yes.
Otherwise,
We're taking. Okay, all set, thanks, okay. The next item is the 2017-18 Middle School Improvement Plan. Welcome, folks.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So, we were here about a month ago and telling you about the master schedule and a little bit of an update on that. Dag Hammarskjold is going to go first. Before I go through our data, and it's just a couple of slides here, I think that our data is pretty indicative of the other 3 schools in that what this represents, and this is star reading and star math, what it represents, and when we captured this was in the first few weeks of school. So as you can imagine, when students come back from summer vacation, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it. So this is just a small slice of time, and this is where Dag Hammarskjold students fell for each of the grades in star reading and star math. So the percentages that you see are the pre-test data results for students that fell into the intervention or on-watch categories. So we do have some work to do, but again, this was just in the first few weeks of school. So how do we address this, and how do we move these numbers lower? Because as those numbers go lower, the other categories there are going to increase. There is a lot here, and before I do that, I can say there is something to be said for direct instruction and practice, practice, practice. And that's fortunately and unfortunately, there is still something to be said for that. But in the course of what we do in observing teachers and working with them. Many teachers have made this part of their goal, so those conversations continue to happen throughout the course of the year. It's not just one thing in August, September, and then we just revisit it in June. There's a lot of dialogue and conversations that happen. So we also have subject area coordinators that work with teachers and support them in a lot of different ways. But our master schedule, and I started by talking about, reminding you of that conversation we had last month. We have a lot of supports built into that master schedule in terms of the collaborative time, the team model itself, and allowing more collaboration with teachers to work together. In addition, SRBI, we took a page from Moran Middle School in terms of the hands up protocol, and it's allowing our teachers to talk about the students and what interventions we can give to them to raise those numbers up too. Our math and reading interventionists work closely with teachers, again, in those subject area data teams and the subject area teams, and providing direct feedback. So that's been happening since that STAR assessment. In addition, the district's partnership with IBM, all ELA and math teachers have been familiarized with the Watson and Light. This is really a great planning tool, and this resource is going to help them with district assessment data and looking ahead at how we can help students instructionally, and we're moving forward with that. Moran can go next, or if you have questions directly for Dag Hammarskjold.
Do you have any questions?
When is the next assessment?
It is happening, the window opened just, I believe, this week, last Friday. Okay. A day off.
Todd, when we were presented with these for the elementary schools, we were told that there's a significant difference between where the students start out the year, and where they end up
Sure.
the year. And then Kerry sent us some stuff on the elementary schools last week. Do you happen to offhand know about what these numbers were at the end of last year?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I know that the numbers of those that fall in on-watch or intervention are much lower, but there's a lot of other ways of measuring whether students are learning rather than just looking at STAR data. There's ERLA, but there's also common formative assessments, district assessments that we do, and so while teachers might in their goal-setting conferences tie one of their goals to STAR, there's other data that we can look at to see how students are growing. So I can say with a pretty fair degree of regularity that our students do grow, and it's just a matter of how can teachers show that growth.
The question that I've brought up a few times is, if I think that a parent needs to have a simple way to understand how their child is doing. And there's 2, and I think you just mentioned 3 more. Right? So 5. A parent's not gonna. What are they going to be able to do with?
I don't know.
How are they going to be able to synthesize 5 different tests or whatever?
Yeah.
Is there some? If I came to you as a parent and said, "How's my child doing?" What would you tell me to look at? That I'm going to be able to understand and then apply to the other 2 children that I have in the school system that are maybe in different schools.
We're talking about human understanding, human intelligence. How do we know a student, any student for that matter, is understanding the material that's in the curriculum? And I don't think we can really dissolve it down to one test. STAR test is a good assessment. Is it the best assessment? I don't know. But when you're talking about human intelligence, it warrants a very large conversation. So I wouldn't answer a question with a question, but usually what I ask, and when I was teaching, I would ask parents, how do you see your child, learning at home? And it kind of prompts a dialogue between the parent and the child. But grades are one aspect, obviously. But in the conversations that happen at home with parents and students, hopefully there is some kind of dialogue, and how is it that they're seeing their reading and writing and other ways that they synthesize information come up.
But don't you think they'd be looking to you folks?
Yeah, of
as
course.
a professional educator?
Sure. So, you know, we do look at STAR. We have ERLA data that we can show. There are the regular grades. I mean, this is where conferences come in and talking with the parents, with the teachers about it. But it's a big conversation rather than just, you know, dissolving it down to one, you know, single score.
So, yeah, thanks.
One of the things that all the administrators, we've all been talking about, and actually Karen Vayu has done some research on, is to figure out a better way of reporting out to parents like you're suggesting. And we do have some options that we're investigating potentially for the fall, looking at a better way of reporting. Right now are not getting rid of grades. So I just want to make that very clear. Not that we're going to get rid of the A and the B and the almighty C and, you know, hopefully not the fateful F. But the thing is that looking at our teachers are beginning to, and they have become more familiar with using the standards and indicators. So finding, and really it's a bridge system to offer parents the ability to see where their students are performing in those areas. That will give them the data that you're looking for. That'll give them an understanding, a profile of what a student should look like and where their student falls. We're not alone in this journey because there's other districts that, and that's where Karen got this, is through other districts investigating the same thing, because Power School doesn't necessarily give a good indicator. And that's why mastery-based learning, getting away from what an A is, or, you know, getting away from what a 3 or a 4 means, but actually seeing what those skills are, and then looking at a body of evidence. So not just having it be where it's a number or that these are skills that your child mastered, but these are pieces of work that show a parent and actually show a student where he or she may be. So that's why it was so crucial, and you as a board have done a great job of keeping up the pace with us when we bring forward the indicators, the standards, the scoring criteria. So that's all been, this year has been really a focus under Carrie's leadership and the curriculum department to make sure people are not just using the scoring criteria, but collecting some samples, work samples, so when a parent does come in, they can not only hear about what a student is doing and what is able to know and if they can read and what does that look like, but then now actually see what that looks like. Because that's the picture that I think most parents, from my experience as an English language arts teacher, wanted to see what their child can do and then know what the next steps I was doing as their teacher, be it in reading or writing. And I think that's really where that's the direction that we're going to move, and we're trying to move based on what we can procure, hopefully sooner rather than later. And we'll be bringing that to the board most likely mid-year, definitely before the spring, to have a conversation about that.
Because, you know, I really struggle with this one.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you just look at these numbers, as with the elementary school, it's saying the majority of our students, at least at the beginning of the year, are either at an intervention level or an on-watch level.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think parents are going to, first of all, you know, when are they going to see this? And second of all, 4 or 5 different tests. I think that we really got to be able to boil it down to, you know, here we have reading and we have math. Is their child at level or below level in reading? Are they at level and below level at math? And then if they are below a level, obviously they need to be real concerned and involved to try to bring them up to level.
And they need to know what, well, and they need to know what makes them quote unquote below level.
I think as the next step.
Yeah.
But the first step, I think,
It's
there
just
needs to be an awareness.
Exactly, awareness.
And that awareness, I think there's just so much data there.
Yeah,
I
and
don't think
well,
they
and
can
that's
draw
where,
an easy conclusion.
and that's really where the grades mask, either they can mask positively or negatively where a student is. And that's why the standards, as these principals and all of our principals are working so hard on, is making sure the standards and the indicators align with what we want students to know and be able to do. So once and that's where it's the missing piece is, you know, the reporting out to parents. What does that look like? So Karen, again, God bless her, she's looked at a variety of different resources, and we're going to start kicking the tires on them after January 1st to figure out what does that look like. Because giving them the STAR data, a parent getting STAR data, that's probably not going to be the most valuable data for a parent to try to decipher. And so I think that's why we want to do it. But no, you're absolutely right. The first start is just an awareness. Yes, is it positive or negative? And if it's positive, then this way. If it's a negative, this way.
Yeah, thanks. Sean, I'm sorry. Folks.
No, that's
Sean.
fine. So I know we do a lot of talking, especially around this stuff about how to recognize where the student is and the the standards and all of that, but I was thinking that maybe what also might be beneficial, and maybe once we have Watson up and running, it might be something that you can look into doing, is a growth chart. Because I think it's not just important to know where your student's at and where they should be at to be on grade level, but if that gap is really big, it's really valuable to know whether or not your student's moving forward. And I think that that's what we miss in a lot of this data, even in the cohort data. What we're not seeing is whether or not our students are learning and at what rate, because it's missing. It's not something that we're capturing. But I don't know if that's something that you could provide in the future or think about providing, because I know as a parent, when I take my kid to the doctor, I get a growth chart, right? So I know that my child is growing on average, and this is the rate, and we're well within our limits. It would be nice to see that for education too.
I think one of the resources I looked at briefly does provide that growth component to it that Karen has brought to us for our review.
Okay, I think that would be a wonderful addition to look at.
And just to add, STAR also has the projected chart for each child, and then you can track their performance throughout the year. The issue is it's just on the STAR assessment. So that projected growth does not reflect, their in-class grades and activities. It's just strictly performance on the STAR assessment. But it does put that projected path for that child, and then you can monitor each additional assessment whether or not they're falling.
I think as a parent, what I'd want is not just the one shot, and I know that you get this at conferences and stuff like that, you kind of get a better picture of who your child is as a student, but maybe something along those lines at the end of each year, like this is how much progress you've made, or twice a year. So this is where we started at the beginning of the year, and this is where we are at the middle of the year. And so that I as a parent know mid-year, let's say, after parent-teacher conferences, that I've taken the steps that have been suggested to me through the conferences and through the other information that you guys are providing, the test results, there's a lot of information that you do get home as a parent, maybe not as much as you would want, and maybe it's not all useful, but you do get information home and you do have those conversations. But I'd like to know that by implementing the steps at home, it worked. I'm making progress, not just some other number that really doesn't mean much of anything.
And that is a big component, again, as Watson gets layered in place. First of all, there's the predictive piece of it. So it's looking at, okay, not only can you measure growth, but where do we see growth? If the same treatment is going to occur, does the growth get increased, or does it stay the same? And if it stays the same, then do you need to do a different treatment to increase the growth? Exactly. So there's that piece, and I think that'll be, value added as we move forward. But again, that's still a work in progress, because there's a lot of algorithm and data that needs to continue to develop there. So, but in the meantime, that's why we wanted to, knowing the trajectory that we need to go, or we need to take as a district, we need to look as an interim opportunity to share with parents.
And I think it would just also be good as a community if we could do it as a cohort, because I think a lot of emphasis gets put on the SAT scores and the PSAT scores and the STAR scores and all these scores, and it doesn't really tell us what our students are learning, right? And I understand that we want them to be at or above what's the expected level, but if we know that we have students coming in and who might not have been ours to begin with at the beginning of the year, and there's this huge gap, but we can say, yeah, all right, our scores are low, but as a district, this is how much growth our students have made. Correct. I think that would really change the conversation from what we sometimes hear about, oh, our test scores are too low, and then that whole discussion about the weight of scores, where we could really say, yes, those scores may not be where we want them, but look at what our students are doing and look at how much they're growing. Just change the focus a little.
No, and that's a fantastic point, because that's really the teacher evaluation model under which we have to, really move our district. And working with the middle school principals for the past many years in their evaluation process and looking at the teacher data, because that all factors into the administrator evaluation, their teacher performance on their SLOs, their goals that are based on STAR in most instances, or ERLA, are off. Their ultimate achievement level is based on their teacher's achievement level. So there is definitely, going back to Jay's initial question, there is definitely substantial growth that's made, but it's based on the SGP, which is the student growth potential. So you have this rate on STAR that they have to meet in that process. But changing the conversation about growth is one that I know the State Department tried to do. But again, it's automatically where you always have your winners and losers, when actually there are a lot more winners. It's just that they're winning a different race. They're not winning necessarily always the goal race, but they're winning the growth race.
And I think that that's why you got to get the state out of local stuff, because what works for us may not
Doesn't
work
work
for
for-
Durham
Yeah.
or Meriden or whatever. And where we really need to focus is have the teachers or principals, our board, in charge of what goes on in our school and how we measure our growth rates and make it comparable, because that's important. You need to be able to have that conversation across town and state lines, but it really needs to be focused at home. And I'd like to see it, and this is my challenge to you guys, I'd like to see it done without adding more tests for teachers to be doing on students. Like a way to do it is we have technology, a way to use it without putting more burden, because I do worry when I look at all the test scores and all the data you guys bring us, how much testing are our students doing and whether or not we're removing too much educational time. So that would be my challenge for you guys in the future.
Thank you. Roxanne?
Yeah, I kind of reinforce what you're saying, Shauna, but, about the growth piece, because we know that we have students that get dropped in our classrooms that do not speak any English. And if they are dropped in our schools in October or middle of September, and can you imagine the growth that individual has experienced by the end of the school year is that doesn't tell the story of the work that's going on in our schools, that not everybody's starting at the same place. That's really all I want. And that's going on every day in our schools. But people don't know that.
No.
Yeah, it's an important point.
Okay. Go ahead, Karen.
Are we going to tease out the subgroups in this data as well?
Yes, I had shared when elementary went forward. We're in the middle, or just started, the new round of testing. Come January, I'll give you an update, and I'll disaggregate some of our subgroups out for you so you can see where they were in September, where they are now, and how we're going to proceed forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Set.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bologna is going to move us forward with the Moran portion of the presentation right now, but I did want to respond just to a couple of the comments and questions that were said. And to go back to Jay's, I think what your initial question was, how do we expect parents to synthesize all this data that we give them? And there's times that it's impossible. It's impossible for a parent who's not an educator necessarily to synthesize all that data. And I think the only way to really do that, and the only way to really do that well, goes back to a couple of the comments that were made, and that's that face-to-face conversation with the teacher. That's the only way that parents are ever going to really know what kind of growth their child is making, is to talk to the actual professionals who are teaching that child in the classroom, see that kid on a day-to-day basis, and know the work they're doing against their peers, the work they're doing against to where they started in the beginning of the year. So I think to synthesize the data, there's only one way to do that, and that's to continuously talk to your teachers as often as is possible, whether it's a quick email, take advantage of conferences, open houses, a phone call. That's going to be the way that a parent is able to take all these pieces of data that we give them and all the data the teachers have and put it all together, because we hold our teachers responsible and accountable for taking that data and synthesizing it. So yes, the Watson and Light program is going to help us out with that, but besides that, they've been working on that in data teams, SRBI teams, in many different ways. So teachers are professionals at taking all that data, putting it all together, and then taking the anecdotal stuff they see the day-to-day basis and putting that all together.
What portion of our parents would you say are doing that currently?
I'm sorry,
And
say again?
what portion of our parents would you say are engaged to that level currently?
That's hard to tell. We always struggle at the middle school. I had a conversation at my PTAC meeting the other night, I think it was Wednesday night, and that is a struggle, is getting parents engaged at the middle school level. It's time, it's interest, it's ability. What parents are engaged in what I just said in that level, that often, I'd say 25 to 30% are engaged at the level that I just said I think would be most helpful. How many parents are engaged at the middle school in general? We're definitely over 50%. We provide many different avenues for that, and we try to engage as much as possible between conferences, open houses. We have a lot of teams that run expos. We have weekly email blasts to talk about curriculum, to talk about what your child is learning. And those are great resources as well. Just if you read an email from your social studies teacher saying, we're talking about the Revolutionary War, you should be able to have a conversation with your child that night, and they should be able to give you some important piece of information relative to what they're learning. That's just one example. But as far as parent engagement, we definitely struggle at the middle school level. I don't know if it's an absorption rate at the elementary level where they just feel, or whether their kid just says, hey, I don't want you at school today. It's middle school. It's not going to help me any having you walk in the building. But yeah, we would love to have more involvement in that at that rate.
think we need a new marketing program for that? That doesn't involve them
There- yeah,
physically
there's-
being there?
Well, there's two different parts to it, and one of the things that I know we talked about even at our middle school meetings is that with conference times, the middle school, having been a middle school teacher and principal, like the high school, but the middle school, there's tends to be a lot of parent interest at the beginning of the year, and unfortunately, because of the schedule that we have, that we've had for years, probably decades, it's not always accommodating to every family. And so we really need to start thinking a little differently on how we approach that. Because if a team wants to meet with as a group of teachers, and you have 125 students on a team, and you only have a night or two, it makes it very difficult to get through that. And I know Mr. Votto, as a previous middle school teacher too, it's not easy. You can't see every family in that structure. So we have to look at that, and we actually, that's one of the things I leaned over to Carrie. I said, this is one of the challenges, because if you invite them but then you can't accommodate them,
Yeah.
are they going to likely coming back a second time?
Probably not.
And our
Probably not.
conference nights are always full. I mean,
They're
both
booked.
schools
I mean,
can
the teachers
we're
are
booked to the capacity.
booked.
Team times get booked up to capacity. Morning times, teachers are meeting before and after school just to
that's
make
where
sure. So,
I think the level
always
of
time.
interest is there. It's just that we have to figure out
Absolutely.
how to make it happen.
absolutely.
Just Mike.
I think student-led conferences helps that situation a lot. Because if the student has to be there, the parents have to be there. Because the child has to be there. Forget about your hockey game tonight. We have conferences, so the child has to be there and meet with the parents and the teachers. And you can accomplish a lot more too. Instead of having those 15-minute conferences with every child's parent, it's more of a group setting, and I think it works very well.
One of the things, a couple of our teams have met with a lot of
success.
success.
At the beginning, surprise.
One of the things that our teams have met with a lot of success is a student expo, where parents come in. We try to do it first thing in the morning, so it's sometimes before work or before they have an elementary drop-off, and parents will come in to see their students presenting on activities they've done. So we just open up all the classrooms on that team. Parents come in and walk through, and that's one way we've tried to engage parents in what my child is learning, how my child is learning, and it goes back to what you said, Mr. Votto, and that is, if your student is there, and if your student says, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, Uncle, can you please come in? I want to show you what I learned in math class this year. It's hard to say no to that, and that's what we've done to try to engage.
There's also a pile of papers there that the child has done
Right.
and are graded. So if there's a 35 on a quiz, that the parents are right there, the kid has to explain why you got the 35.
Right, absolutely.
It works.
Shawna?
You just said something before about the emails, which I thought was really interesting. If maybe instead of just we are discussing the Revolutionary War, if you sent an email with dinner time talking points, because I think that would accomplish two things. One, we're encouraging families to eat dinner together, which is important for a slew of reasons. And two, you're engaging the parent in something it's kind of already pre-made for them, right? So here are your dinner time talking points. It's almost like getting the parents involved in the homework in a different kind of way. I think that would be pretty interesting. I'd like to see something like that on my level, actually.
It's a great idea.
I will say they do, so I just did it with Jack, Mrs. Ferretti, who's an amazing kindergarten teacher. Sends home a letter every Friday to the parents of questions that we're supposed to ask our child. Because if you ask a kindergarten student what they did in class for that day, Jack has done nothing but push kids on the tire swing all year long. So those questions really prompt, and it works really well at the elementary level. And I'm assuming it would work just as well all the way through high school.
I mean, I'd love to see something like that. My son's in 5th. I'd love to, we try to engage, but he's 10, but yeah.
Just one more thing I wanted to make sure was mentioned. These numbers can look scary at the beginning of the year, especially the intervention on watch kind of numbers. By default, we have a system in place to meet with parents to discuss that level of detail. If students are achieving at this level, very often they either have an IEP, have a 504 plan, or are entered into reading or math intervention, or both. So for those students, I mean, an IEP is a time when you have many experts around the table describing to you your student's level of progress. By the time they get to middle school, they kind of can say, yeah, that sounds about right. I know my student as a learner. That's kind of what I heard for a few years now. If they're in intervention, they get tiers. So they're communicating with the interventionist. Their progress monitored very often, much more often than a student who's at level or above. So of course, we want to be able to express levels of learning to all of our students, even those who are at level or above. But I think we do a pretty good job for those who are not meeting our expectations at the beginning. So I just wanted to make sure that was mentioned.
Thank you. Thanks.
So now that slide's been up for about 15 minutes and everyone's had the chance to see the numbers on there. And I'm a visual learner myself, so I just wanted to put a little bit of graphic on there. To go back earlier to your question about, Jay, the numbers that we typically see at the end of the year, not to hold my feet to the fire on the numbers, but I want to say most of our grade levels, by the end of the year, we typically see between 62 and 68% of that at or above benchmark. So, I mean, do we see a huge gain every single year? No. Do we see the same type of gain in every single grade? No. But I think, I like to think of this data that we provide right here as that initial really quick snapshot for each kid, and a really good data point to start that conversation that I want to have with every parent about, here's your STAR score, and that's where it kind of stops with a number, and here's what we're going to do moving forward, or here's the strategies we're going to put into place. So I think this brings up a really good, a kind of easy representation of where your kid stands in September, and then here's where we're going to go. I think these numbers, reflect the work that we've put in terms of what we want to offer for interventions, and how much we want to have a focus on getting all of those kids that at or above benchmark level. The focus is not just on ELA and math either. The focus is on writing overall. The focus is on HOW scores. The focus is on building up those skills needed in science as well. So this is really just providing you a quick snapshot of what these kids can do. In addition to the academic piece, I think it's kind of important to include what we have as far as a school when it comes to the school climate. And I think, talking about the level of parent engagement, things like that, I think the climate of a middle school is incredibly important to getting more involvement from both students and parents. So this is just a quick snapshot from some of our data last year. The same question for both students and parents. I feel comfortable sharing my thoughts and ideas at this school. The colors that we want to see are that blue and that, and I'm going to go with a burnt orange. And we really want to see those as much as possible. And really not focusing on the fact of, are you always happy with the outcome? Because we, as much as we want to try to make every parent happy with everything that we do, more important than anything else, we want all students and all parents to feel like their opinion is valued, heard, and addressed the way that it should be. So I think this is a key component of what we want to look for in terms of improving our school.
Could you tell us, I can't read, even with my glasses, what those colors represent?
So this was done through our climate survey last year, and I got it. And so every parent and student, they were asked to respond either with all the time, most of the time, some of the time, or none of the time.
Okay.
So the blue that you see is they responded all of the time.
Got it.
The burnt orange is most, the gray some, and the yellow none. Obviously, the goal is to get, honestly, the number one goal is to get rid of that yellow altogether, and hopefully I don't have to see it on that graph at all.
Gotcha.
I don't expect to please everybody all the time.
Sure.
But I would love it to say that, there's no one responding with none. I think that's an overall goal for anybody. But this is just part of another component that we have for our school improvement plan.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
Any questions about the data at all? So, without reading all of this, and obviously it's very small print, I'm not sure I could read it, but what it all comes down to, and I think one of the greatest benefits, and not speaking to either of the other levels, one of the greatest benefits with the middle school level, especially here in Wallingford and the teaming model, is the collaborative time that our teachers have. And in all of our bullets in the academic section, and as well as the work we do towards our climate section, have to do with the collaborative time the teachers have. And that's something that we fight tooth and nail never to lose, because it's such a benefit to our students in the end, and such a benefit to what they can do, between the instructional data team time we provide them, to the SRBI time that we provide them, to the new, as Mr. Snyder referenced, the new collaborative time that we provided them this year with our new schedule, to the team time that they always have and will continue to have. These are all times that they can talk about data. They can synthesize that data for the parents and for the students. They can talk about strengths and weaknesses they're seeing and how they're going to attack those strengths and weaknesses. We go to things like tier 1 instruction all the way down to differentiated instruction for different levels. That team time, that collaborative time, is what is the key to our action plan. It's the key to our student success plans. It's the key to our school improvement plans, and our teachers do a great job utilizing that time at both schools. I've seen it in action. To the after school department time they have, where they get to collaborate with Crosstown, with central office. It's just an excellent resource our teachers have, and it's used to its fullest. So that really sums up what we do in our action plan, is the teacher collaboration.
Thank you. Any questions?
So just generally speaking, with all your schedule changes, I mean, here we are in December, have we is everybody pretty much gotten to a good place for you guys in the middle school? You know, the whole lunch waves and all that, you know, is it, I would think by now you guys are clicking along pretty good, or you still have some glitches, or?
Both schools just entered their second trimester,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of the glitches at this point have been worked out.
Good.
Students, staff, parents have sort of glided naturally into the second trimester,
Yeah.
I think, at both schools.
Good.
We do an excellent job at lunch. If Dan and I have to, we open sandwiches, we open fruit cups,
Yeah.
whatever we can do to make that process
Yeah.
move along faster, we
Good.
do. So we're experiencing some good transitions and good opportunities for us. But no, the schedule I find has been way more beneficial than even I expected in some places. So no, it's been very good.
Oh, good.
Very good.
Glad
And
to
I-
hear that.
I think I speak for the rest of the group on that as well.
No, I haven't heard anything. It wasn't a loaded question. I just trying to show support for you guys. I know it was a change, and a lot of communication had to go out, and I'm glad it's going well for you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Great. All set?
Thank you all for
Okay,
your time
great.
tonight. I
Well, thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. Thanks for all you're doing, and looks like a real wholesome plan that you have
I
there.
appreciate that comment. All right, good evening, everyone. My eyes are not as good as Dan, so
Yeah.
I have my chart right here in front of me as you do there. The numbers are very similar. Like Todd mentioned earlier, across the board, we're seeing similar results as far as our numbers go for the STAR assessment. Jay, and I'll talk to this when I get to my third slide, but the most important thing about the early STAR assessment is it allows us to identify students that need support quicker than we ever have been able to do it before. You know, typically we had to wait for teachers to become accustomed to the student and their performance and really get kind of a grasp of their reading level or their math level. We actually could get their 8th grade results, when they come up to us in 9th grade, so we could start the year with a baseline understanding of where they are. And I'd say the moves we made to eliminate homework that's not graded on content, really artificially inflating those grades, is allowing us to get a much more accurate picture recently of a student's performance and the level at which they're at. So these numbers, again, are all very similar. And obviously, every assessment we move on and go and give for the STAR, we look to see those numbers crawling to the bottom of the chart. So, you know, your hope and your dream for your students is that you're moving a few students from the top of that chart down a level as they go on. And the benefit of STAR is, I believe we started the STAR assessment 4 years ago. And what'll eventually be able to happen is we will have STAR results from early literacy all the way through our students in 11th and 12th grade. So you'll have a really long history of results on the STAR that can track a student's performance. So it'd be really wonderful to see eventually. Any questions on the data that you see in front of you?
Maybe I just don't see why aren't the numbers the same? Is the number, like for instance, the total in the first column, 293?
Yes.
That's the total number of 9th graders?
Yeah, that were tested. So there's certain kids that were tested. Some students don't have to take the test because of an IEP designation. Some are absent. Some were new to the district and didn't take it, so the numbers won't exactly be the same. The issue that you'll see big, Mr. Votto is over here, 187 and 154.
Yeah, that was mine.
So those math numbers, if you are in pre-calculus, AP Calc, or AP Stats, you do not take the math assessment. So that's the big increase. The number's actually in the bottom of the slide, but for Lyman Hall, it's about 188 students that are not tested in math. So it does affect that number, but as long as you know that, it solves that problem. But what we don't want to do, to Shauna's point, is over-test our students. So the math assessment in STAR actually maxes out at Algebra 2. So all our gifted math students, or our students that are performing at a high level, there's no reason to continually give them the assessment. Because at that point, it's 45 minutes of time just to get the same result, and we would be losing valuable instructional time.
So that's a piece of your story. I mean, to Shauna's point also about that skews, it changes your numbers dramatically because you're not testing people that are obviously going to do very well.
That could excel.
That's exactly right.
But I think,
and that's a reasonable answer you gave, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation
support that.
we had, and in English, it will eventually move that way.
Yeah.
But we want a series. Kids have to prove and identify on a series of tests.
But
before we
I
stop
wonder in
testing.
other districts if they choose to test those students in 11th and 12th grade, their numbers are always going to look higher. So you can skew your numbers, I guess, potentially, if that's your desire.
You could.
right?
I think this is the most important piece, the conversation between us, the board, and the community, so the community understands our testing practices.
Right,
And
I
I
agree.
think, and Dr. Menzel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a majority of our families would rather we stop testing
I totally agree.
when it loses its effectiveness.
Yeah, I'm just saying, though, to compare to other districts, potentially
Is
other
difficult.
districts could be testing that cohort.
Well, and you'll see that with the SAT data too. When you compare the state SAT comparison is valuable. The national comparison is still good, but it is skewed a little because we do test everyone, where many states across the United States really only those very strongly college-bound students are
Gotcha.
taking the SAT.
The STAR data is not comparable because not all districts use STAR.
Right.
So that's more of an internal measure. But again, I do think though that you could kind of, if you think about the fact that the students who are in those upper level math classes are not taking the assessment, one could assume that they would be above the benchmark. They
Exactly.
would be below it.
Right.
So your scores, your percentage of students, yes, that has to be adjusted. And I think that that's always one of those challenges. We also have to remember with this STAR test, and Carrie whispered in my ear before, you got to remember this is only a 10-minute test in
Yeah.
some instances.
Right. It could be.
So it's not, you know, we're talking, we don't want to put that much stock
Emphasis.
in 10 minutes. And we don't necessarily, one of the things that I think is also a point of reference that, you know, we have to balance is that we don't want kids to be so concerned about the assessment, but however, there are some reports that we can get where we have students who are flying through these tests and, you know, no wonder they're not on level because they took a test that should have taken them at least, you know, 10, 15, 20 minutes and they took it in less than 3. So the thing is that
So you're
there's
suggesting
that,
their attention to detail is suspect?
it's either that or they're card-carrying members of Mensa. But the thing is that there's that balance, and so I think that we walk that fine line because it's one of the many layers of information to share with families. But again, it's an important one, and our teachers are using it in a growth format.
But the other thing we haven't mentioned either, though, even with in the middle school level, is that many of the kids who take this test, like even the language arts part, I mean, every child takes it, regardless of whether they are good English-speaking children or whether they
Well,
are
that was my point
special
before.
needs. I mean, everybody takes the test, so that does.
Yeah, that has a
skew results,
factor.
too. That's a factor.
What? And
Goes back to Karen's point about disaggregating and looking at the subgroups.
And again, I think both middle school administrations talked about it perfectly, but what it does is it starts the conversation about a student and where they are, whether that be with the parent or the team of teachers involved in that student. And we'll get to that a little bit more on the third slide, but I think that's kind of the most important piece of the data.
Sal, when we get to mastery-based learning, is it going to be difficult to interpret whether a student's mastered a certain fundamental or not? Is it going to be continue to be this sort of thing that you can't use this one
I think
indicator,
it's,
you can't use that one?
no, I think it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be necessarily better or worse. I think it's going to be different, and I think it's going to give the reason why I would say I would lean on the side of better, because there's going to be more support for why the student is being identified as having either mastered or not mastered.
Yeah, I guess
because
my
that
point, is it
body
gonna
of
be clear?
evidence,
Is
it's going to be clearer. It's going to be clearer, and that's why.
Clear enough that a parent can
because
say
it-
my child has mastered it, or they've learned
Yes.
what they need to know about it, or they
I mean,
haven't
in a
learned it.
mastery-based system, and I have to say that we weren't, when I was teaching, it wasn't called that. But we had to have evidence to show, because we were under the control of the state at the time, we had to have evidence to support why a student was receiving the grades that he or she was receiving. So we had a portfolio on every student. And we had a rubric that went with it. Now it's scoring criteria, but we had a rubric at the time, and we had to explain to the parent, and we had to have the child be able to understand where he or she was on that continuum of growth and on that continuum of success. And they would have to describe that, and it was a lot of work. Joe Piacentini was actually a principal after I left, or assistant principal at the middle school that I started my teaching in. He would agree that not always was done in the same way in every team, but my team that I taught with, that was the way we did it, and it was clear for our parents. And it was much clearer for many of our parents who the English or the American education system wasn't the system in which they learned, because they were able to see their child's work, and then you had copies of other students' work without their names or identifying factors, and you could show them, this is where your child is, this is where we want your child to be. Let's look at this, let's read this together and go through it. But as Joe said earlier, our teachers are doing this. It's just gonna make it a little bit cleaner for them and a little bit more transparent. Right now they're doing it and they have to pull so many things together to do it, and we're hoping to put it in a place that it's much more efficient for them, shall I say.
And make it clearer to the parents.
And more, much clearer to the parent.
I still, as I listen, I still have no idea how much of an issue we have, how much of a problem, how much of a challenge these folks have. What percentage of the students really are below where they need to be?
And that's the thing, is that I think that most of our administrators, if not all of them, would say that I think that the data doesn't tell the true story. And I don't think we have.
Where are they behind?
Yeah, we don't have 50% of our students not performing, at the level they should be performing. I really don't believe any of us think that at a grade level there are 50% of our students not performing where they should be. I think many of us at the beginning of the year would agree that it's probably about 35%, because it's that group, and then it's working with them. But then you have to remember that 30 to 35%, even though they might not attain the total expectation that's required of them to meet grade level expectation, the growth that they are making because of where they started is significant growth. So that goes back to Shauna's point. It's determining, how do you measure success? But I agree, I don't think these numbers necessarily paint the full picture. I think they give us, as Joe just said, that it gives you a snapshot of where you are, and it gives you a place to begin the conversation. And I think that both high schools, with the implementation of PLGs last year, it allows a lot of that data conversation to occur that wasn't occurring before.
And surely causes a lot of alarm.
I think
just looking at the numbers.
I would say less alarm and more of an avenue for us to approach it much earlier on.
I mean, to a lay person.
Yes. I think our biggest responsibility is to alleviate some of that alarm by highlighting what we're doing for the students that are at that struggling level. So next, we have the school day SAT data here that we put up. Obviously, like you said, the alarming numbers are math results from last year. Our reading results way outperformed our math results, and obviously we continue to look into that through curriculum and through preparation. In the next slide, you'll see very clearly one of the major focuses is our SRBI program and how we're intervening with those students that need the support. Shauna, just to go to your point, we do look at cohort data across the board, and just to highlight, I didn't put it up there, but a few of our numbers. When you look at our 9th graders from last year and this year's 10th graders, their PSAT score, in the fall of last year they had an 888, in the fall of this year they had a 934. So that's very appropriate growth for that score, and now that score is very closely related to how they're going to perform on the SAT. So having the students take it in 9th, 10th grade, and then the SAT in 11th grade, it will give us a good kind of estimate of where we could predict those students would be. So we do track cohort data. It's just sometimes a little more difficult to do. Any questions on there? These are some of the things we're going to focus on with literacy and numeracy. But I really wanted to, it's very much the same things that they're doing at the elementary school, very much the same as what they're doing at Sheehan. And the Sheehan administration and the Lyman Hall administration worked hard over the summer to really come together and put together a really clear and consistent SRBI process. With the implementation of the STAR assessment, the PSAT data, and all the other data that we pull together, student performance, student behavior, student attendance, all of the adults in our building have the ability to refer a student to SRBI. What that does is it allows a team of professionals to review the complete record, meet with a student, and then eventually meet with a student and a parent to talk about the struggles that particular student is having. One of the benefits of STAR is that after a student takes a test, it gives you very clear curriculum-focused things that they need to focus on in order to move to that next step. So it's just another piece along with the teacher data that we get, the information we get from the parents, and the information we get to the students. So I'd say with the implementation of the SRBI, And all the data sources that we pull, like I said, academic performance, test performance, behavioral performance, and school attendance, which is a huge one. You could imagine our students that are not attending at a regular basis are falling into those lower categories as far as the testing goes. So all of that being put together in SRBI with our intervention program is just a really fantastic way for us to close that gap with the students that are behind and also stay on top of it and not allow them to continually fall behind.
Great.
Any other questions? All right.
Good evening, everyone. As you can see, you should be able to tell me now about these charts after you've heard them for a few readings. But this is our initial data from testing completed at the start of the school year in September. Our students are currently going through their second round of the STAR assessments. So we break down in terms of percentile ratings, and then you'll see at the bottom of the slide a category below benchmark. One of the things that hadn't been said, but I think is important to note, benchmark is grade level specific. So the benchmark for grade 9 is different than the benchmark for grade 10 and so on. So as students transition through high school, the benchmark they need to meet goes higher and higher. Because I know sometimes we look at data quickly and we say we want to see the growth, we want to see the growth. So you just can't compare in those ways. But as has been said, and we don't see this here, but looking at past data, we do see that where students start in September, where they end in May, we do see that growth does take place. But this is useful information for classroom teachers in terms of tailoring instruction, for us to identify students who are in need of additional support through our interventionists, or perhaps through the SRBI team, as Joe mentioned previously. Also with our SAT data, a little bit different. Joe had the school day data. This is the cohort data, but basically broken down the same way. We have our evidence-based reading and writing score and our math score, and you can see how the students compare to their state peers as well as where they compare nationally. We do very well with our evidence-based reading and writing. We still have some growth in terms of mathematics. And based on those scores, we decided to take a look academically at literacy and numeracy as targets. And in terms of literacy, we're looking at both reading comprehension and writing in terms of informative writing and argumentative writing. In terms of numeracy, we're looking primarily at problem solving, interpretation of data, and what we find is some of the strategies are listed there, but what I think has been very helpful at Sheehan for some of the success that we see is we take a multiple disciplinary approach. So it's not just the English teachers that are teachers of writing. You see writing being attacked in multiple subject areas. The same with our problem solving, that multiple department areas are taking a look at that. And as has been stated previously, the professional learning groups give an organized time every other day where teachers of the same course speak about what they're seeing in the classroom, how they compare to what their peers are doing, and how they can make collective changes for the betterment of our students.
Any questions?
Do you have anything to add? See, that's what's easy about
Mr.
going last, because you just
Mr.
have to do the
Dirksen,
quick
Mr.
summary.
Marciano, anything to add?
Wow, all done.
Anything? Just you're there as bodyguards. All right.
Yeah.
I was going to say they're actually my backup dancers. We were going to do an interpretive dance later. but-
There you go. You could do the Carlton. There you go.
All
The
set.
mafioso.
Okay. Good. I guess we're all set then, huh? Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
very much, folks, for all you're doing. Okay, and our next topic is policy, and we have items A through H. Any that we can
Yep,
combine
I'd
here?
like to comment first on A through E because I feel like there's
A through E.
A through E is very simple. No content was changed at all in these policies. But with Melissa Isles leaving the district, we needed to just remove her name. And we decided to take the approach of, instead of listing a specific name, we listed the title of the position that would handle these. So if there were continued change in the future, they still know who to contact. We put that contact information is listed on the district website. Online, it will be a link right there, and that really will provide the most current opportunity for anyone who's searching out this information to find it. So all of A through E deals with name change only. We also took the opportunity in these policies to change Cindy Lavalette's name to her position as well, just to keep it consistent throughout both policies. So that's all A through E.
Okay. So we'll take consensus? There's no discussion?
No.
Okay.
No.
Amanda?
Yes.
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 And yes, thank you.
Okay, so F and G are coordinated policy and regulation.
Excuse me, Carrie, these are the first round for all these, correct? So we'll see
Correct.
these 2 more times.
Yes.
Just want to reinforce that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't mention
No,
that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. F and G are new policies, new policy and new regulations. So they're both mandated per Connecticut state statute. It's for physical restraint and seclusion of students, which is not new in terms of practice, but we never, or this district did not have a policy in regards to it. So while teachers for the past several years have had to have training in terms of when this is allowable and what to do and go through specific PMT training as it relates to physical restraint and seclusion, we did not have board policy or board regulation to assist with that. So this policy and set of regulations is straight from our attorney, Shipman Goodwin. We changed titles and names, but kept the policy intact because it is very specific. It gets into very specific instances when this can be used. It follows Connecticut state law to the T. And so we felt it was best left the way our attorney presented it.
Fine. Any questions, discussion? Karen?
On the, I guess this is the regulation. Under definitions, and looking at the students, how are we ensuring compliance with this policy with our outplay students?
That is a good question. Every outplacement would have a policy on file as well and would need to follow the same Connecticut state statute.
That's correct. And then in addition to that, after the students have a number of restraint and seclusions, the law requires that we hold a PPT to discuss if any changes need to be made to their behavior plans or whatnot. So we would be contacted when we're getting close to needing to go out for a PPT.
Okay, now in the seclusion room requirements on page 4, it indicates be of a size that is appropriate to the chronological and developmental age, size, and behavior of a student. That seems rather vague to me. I'm not understanding what that size may look like.
So I could speak to that. That's regarding a closed door timeout kind of situation, which to my knowledge, we are not using any place in our district. We have cool down areas where children are able to go and take a break and take some space. That particular, the specifics are really for, you know, the closed door kind of timeouts requiring the door to not be able to lock.
Right.
You know, you have to hold the handle, and when you let go, the door pops open. So we don't have any of those kinds of
Well,
rooms.
right now we don't.
Right.
But in the future, we could have it, and I find this to be a little concerning to me. I mean, we could have someone secluded in a, 3x4 space. So this is not very specific as to size.
It doesn't to size, but it has to meet all of the qualifications also listed below. So you have A, B, C, D, E, and F. Its intent in terms of the law is to ensure that it is a room that is accessible, that it is spacious enough for a student, that the student is safe, that it is like a typical room in any part of the building in terms of ceiling height, in terms of lighting, in terms of venting and air handling and all of those things.
I saw that, but it doesn't really give me a square footage or anything like that.
It doesn't, but it does, further down speak to the fact that it does need to be comparable to any other room in that building, so that you're not using a space that wasn't meant for children or for adults.
So the next question is use of pharmacological agents on page 5. Now, this seems a little concerning to me. As an emergency intervention to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or to others. Now, do we have any circumstances in the school district at this point that now, do we have any outplay students that have this in place? And how are we overseeing that?
I don't understand exactly what you're asking.
Again, because this is right out of the law, the outplacement, whatever school falls under their board policy and otherwise, which has to follow the same state regulations and otherwise.
I'm just looking at from a perspective of who is making the decision.
To my knowledge, this is not in place anywhere.
Okay. Well, then, I guess, why is it here?
Because it's required by state statute.
I mean, but, if you
Our
look at the
policy
wording,
can't-
it's concerning to me.
Yeah, the challenge is our policy we can't change, as you know, we can't change state statute. And
Right.
we can't also write a policy for just the present population. If there were a future population that came
Exactly.
to us, then we would have to be prepared for it. So, again, I understand the concern about both pieces of language, but those are, again, it's the,
We intentionally didn't want to leave chunks out of the policy because it's state statute. We felt that it was important to put in all of the guidelines and otherwise so that it's clear, it is undisputable, and people weren't making their own decisions without having guidance per our district policy. Which is why, while we don't have students currently that need any of this, we didn't want to leave it out.
I understand what you're saying. I don't have a terrific comfort level, especially with the pharmacologic agents, because that requires a judgment call. And that's
I think, Karen, that that may be in regard to when the school system needs to call an ambulance for a student. And if that were to occur, it would be made by medical personnel. It would certainly not be made by educational.
This is specifically making mention of medication, and this is, well, we can discuss this afterwards.
what we can
It
do is
makes
we
it-
can definitely bring that back to the attorney, because believe me, we're not going to change, nor would you want us to change the language to violate state statute or go against it.
No, I'm
we can
looking at
get
this
it-
policy. and
Yeah, we can get
there are
clear-
some parts of it, I mean, clearly if that's in state statute, we can't.
Yeah, so we can get clarification, because, I mean, sometimes, as we all know, state statute, if you read them, they're not really always written for the person to best understand and translate. So,
But wouldn't you figure if you're talking about a student in this regard, they must have an IEP, a 504, something in place that would be specifically, that would talk about that, obviously that specific student and the guidelines.
But the question becomes, if you're looking at an agent that's being given because there's a behavioral outburst,
Right.
who is determining that you've met the threshold of administering that medication, and who's taking the responsibility for that?
and that would
who
go,
is-
as Roxanne just said, and again, I'm not, I'm not, the director of special ed, but I can say from the fact that you would have an IEP, there would be a
Right.
medical plan.
Right.
The nurse would most likely,
Right.
if it's something that's going to happen during one of our school days,
Right.
the nurse would be the main person, the point of contact. They would have been trained by the student's physician, attending physician, as to what those characteristics look like. And again, policy shouldn't cover that much detail, because what might be the case for one student might not be the case for
I
another.
understand that, but when you
So-
look at some of this, when you read through it,
So maybe a
It's
statement, I don't know,
concerning.
a compromise statement we could check on, and I don't know if this would help, is could we?
or even making reference to
I know where you're gonna-
our other policy of who would be administering
Or-
this and who would be making the
It
assessment.
does, if you look at C,
says,
I want to clarify, potentially this might answer your question, that you would still need to be following the Board of Education's administration of medication policy,
Right, but I
which
think
is signed off by a parent, is signed off by a licensed practitioner, et cetera. You wouldn't be able to supersede that, even in an emergency.
here's well, we can have a sidebar conversation on this, especially if the nurse is otherwise engaged in something else. And who would be making that decision? But we can have that discussion.
You want to do that, because this has to go
afterwards.
through 2 more times?
Two
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
times, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have the gift of time.
So the,
We just want to be
Provide
careful
the
with the
feedback for-
specificity that you put in, because you're never, unfortunately, this plan is never going to be able to account for every situation. So what I was going to recommend, maybe it's also beyond meeting the other board policies, but also directly relates to or refers back to the individual student's
what I would be more
IEP
focused
or
on.
personalized plan.
Yeah.
Something to that effect, because that plan should have the layers. Because I know, I'm thinking in mind of a medical plan where there's multiple levels, just in
Right, but I
case
mean,
somebody's
there
not
needs to
available.
be some kind of reference to that.
So maybe that's something as a potential compromise there.
On page 8, letter 9, responsibilities of the Director of Special Education, I think there's a duplication in that first paragraph. Because it starts on the second sentence, and whether instances of seclusion within the district.
I
And
see.
then it says, and whether instances of seclusion were conducted pursuant to IEPs.
Where are you, Karen?
In
That
A.
there's- In A?
Page
Okay.
8.
I
Roman
didn't know what
numeral 9.
A is, okay.
Shelley, you missed that.
Sorry.
But actually, can we just go back 1 second, because on what we were discussing earlier, with respect to including the IEP, isn't that really kind of already there? And again, I'm on page 5, under the psychopharmacologic, as an integral part of the, number 2, under A. Boy, that's confusing. Under A, number 2.
Yeah, that's,
It says an integral part of the student's established medical or behavioral
Right.
support or educational plan. To me, that's the IEP, is it not?
That is, it
it
is.
So it's
it
already
is-
there.
It is, but
Right.
there are concerns that I would have.
Okay.
You indicated that the staff is PMT trained?
Yes, by state law, you're required to have your crisis team in each building PMT trained. And so each school is going through the process of having all of their members PMT trained per state law. The state law changed recently. Originally, it was your entire school needed to be PMT trained, and then recognizing the task that would be, has changed it to your crisis team. And your crisis team is made up of many different members of your school community of different roles, so that every situation is potentially covered.
Okay, so they indicate the creation of a plan to provide training regarding the prevention of incidents requiring physical restraint. This plan shall be implemented not later than July 1st. Do we have a plan
We
now?
do. Cindy's,
Okay.
Mrs. Levelette's office is working with the schools to get all of their members trained. And we have been doing that since the beginning of last year.
Yeah, we started
Okay.
We started that last fall. Actually, if you recall, in our negotiations, or might have not come out in our full conversation, but in our teacher negotiation, we changed the length of a professional development day to accommodate PMT trainings, because it is 7 hours. So we need to extend that. So that started actually last fall proactively. We were providing that training.
Okay, and do we have an
2016.
average number of restraints and seclusions per year that we have now?
Per year?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I would be able to get that information. We have to fill out, every time a restraint and seclusion occurs, the school will fill out a form, they send it over, I need to review it, and we need to register it with the state. So yes, I would be able to get that. I don't have it right now, but
Oh,
I would be able
I
to
didn't
get
expect
that
you
for
to, but if we could have that information, that'd
Absolutely.
be great. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else? So how do we want to move on this one? Okay, Karen, to move it
F
to
and
the
G
next?
together?
Yeah,
We're
it's
not
F and G
voting. We're-
together, right?
It's just
a-
for a first.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
just a
it's
read
just a
through.
first
Okay.
read through, that's
Yeah.
all.
Okay. And we have H left,
Okay,
right?
so the
Well,
last.
wait, do you want to do that? You want to take consensus on F and G?
Okay.
I'm not there yet.
Even for the first, no?
Didn't we?
Yeah,
I don't think you really.
We don't need? we
yeah,
didn't-
no.
Okay,
It's only a
all
first
right.
read.
Never mind. I don't know what I'm thinking. That's why I guess I thought that way, yeah.
Okay.
All right, then I'll do it.
No, it's fine.
Okay, Amanda?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
And yes, and this is to move it forward to the second presentation.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and H.
Okay, so the last one is a revision to an existing policy that was last revised in 2000. It is regarding agenda construction for Board of Education meetings and posting of agenda. We made a change recently that on Friday afternoons by 4 p.m., we are posting the agenda online for anyone who would like to view it prior to the board meetings on Mondays. So we needed to revise the policy. So in doing so, we listed out how the agenda is constructed, how we are posting the agenda for both regular meetings and for special board meetings. And this also aligns with Connecticut general statutes.
So is the change, Carrie, that we're posting it online at 4 o'clock on Friday?
Correct.
Is that that's the only difference, right? Are we still?
For the most part, yes.
Are we still, are you still required to post it at town hall as well?
It still does
So
go
this
to
is an
town hall.
added
Yep.
means of transparency,
Yep.
I guess,
So
in
if
an
you look
essence.
at the old version, BDB, that policy is still lettered.
Yep.
It speaks to, on the Thursday prior to the Monday meeting, creating the agenda and that it would be posted in the town hall. And so we just kind of specified it in a clearer fashion.
That's fine. Thank you.
So we'll have it both ways now.
Pardon?
We'll have it both ways now.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on that? Take consensus? All right with everybody?
Yes?
Yes.
Amanda?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
There used to be another sentence in this old policy regarding 3 board members requesting something be placed on an agenda.
There are many different board policies in regards to this. This is the one that I pulled, so
I seem to remember another iteration of this because I invoked it. That's how I remember it so very clearly.
well, this one
You need
states
3
that
board
any.
members
Would
to
you-
put
There
something
was,
on an agenda?
it was a mandatory,
I don't know. I can check into it for you for the next read.
We've never operated that way.
Why would you want that?
Whenever any one board member's made a request, we put it on.
Are you thinking at a meeting to add an agenda item? That's a 3/5 vote.
nope.
So you do have to have that.
That's
No,
what you're talking
you
about.
remember
That's
what
not
it
what you're
was.
talking about.
You
No.
mean to just put something on as an agenda item?
You need 3 people?
Right.
Because we never did it. I mean,
both versions, and I know the original one is from
People
quite some
just
time
ask.
ago.
It might be a
As long as
different-
it's prior to the agenda being posted, anybody can ask to have an agenda item on the agenda, and you're
I'll
just
go
asked
back
to
and look.
provide
It
support.
might be a different policy, but
Could
it
be.
does make reference to that. I'll have to go back and research.
You wouldn't want that, would you?
At the time, it was very handy.
Yeah, but, well, okay.
I mean, there's only 9 of us representing 40,000.
It was an issue.
Oh,
there
okay,
was
because whenever anybody's asked me to put anything
Right,
on
absolutely. I mean,
the
and
agenda
this
for
is-
this committee, and I'm sure Michael the same way in the operations. I would think that's the way you'd want to.
Yeah,
Basically, people have
Not
always,
in the last
the
6
courtesy has been that the board
Wow.
member
Right.
would reach out to.
In the past, it hasn't always been that way.
Okay.
Let's,
Well, thank you all for being the
That-
new way.
Playing nice in the sandbox.
The new,
That's
the new
why
way
Really,
for
that's
the
what we're
last,
talking
the
about
new way
here.
for at least the last 9 years.
Yes,
I appreciate
yes.
that.
Speaking of in the past, speaking of in the past,
Karen,
this is
I will
the,
speak to Betsy tomorrow morning because, you know, we'll file through all of the other bylaws of the board that are policy to see if we can find what you're looking for, and I'll reach out to you directly.
okay, thank you.
Okay?
speaking of in the past, this is the end of my last instructional committee
Oh
meeting.
my God, you're right.
So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for me to serve in this position.
Oh,
Roxanne.
My pleasure.
And Amanda, thank you for serving as vice chair.
You're most welcome.
And I really do have great admiration and for the passion and dedication that each one of you have for the successful education of all of our students. I don't know of a public service that has such an overall impact on the rest of the lives of our children as a successful education. So God love you. And in the words of Jerry Garcia, please keep on trucking. Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.